Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics. So, if the next Trump presidency forces the UK to choose between closer relationships with the US and the EU, which way will it tilt? Well, it's possible that Keir Starmer is today giving us an indication as he becomes the first British Prime Minister in my lifetime to attend the Armistice Day ceremony in France, where he's going to hold talks with Macron about how we deal with Ukraine, the Middle East, a few other issues, now that America has decided that a ball in a china shop is the path to peace. But first, for daily political commentary, please click the subscribe button so you don't miss out. So, in the past, the UK tried to act as a bridge between the United States and Europe. As a member of the EU, that was our foreign policy main purpose, even though we often messed it up and failed to make it work for us. But since Brexit, that purpose has evaporated. If we're being pragmatic, we now have to view relationships with the United States and the EU separately. We're no longer in a position to be brokers for anything. For those who want to see the UK take the lead on any issues at all, we can still do so on European security and defence because our membership of NATO is not affected, and despite the fact that this is also an organisation where the rules we follow are determined by foreigners, for some reason Brexiteers don't want us to leave that as well. But the Labour government faces a dilemma. Now, I often think the term dilemma is overused. When people say, oh, I've got a dilemma, what they usually mean is, now I've got a decision to make where there's an obviously correct choice, I just don't like it. But it's still the obviously correct choice, so there's no dilemma. But this is a real one. Like, Trump intends to keep pretending that he's this great businessman and deal maker, despite the fact he's had more businesses go bust than there have been US presidents in my lifetime. And so he intends to play the part again on the world stage, but because he's actually a rubbish deal maker, he will instead attempt to make gains via extortion, not negotiation. He's a bully, and he's going to attempt to bully the world, including the UK. Now, we can't just stick two fingers up at him, as much as many of us would like Starmer to do. It would be hilarious. I think we liked that scene in Love Actually far too much, but it's not a sensible thing to do. So he needs to do his best to try to come to terms with America, to succeed where he can and sort of, be pragmatic where he can't, so that if he fails and we suffer some ill effects and other parts of the world suffer ill effects, Starmer can at least say, well, I tried, I engaged, and then work out ways to mitigate the damage. If he just sticks two fingers up at the orange one, then the public will then blame him for everything coming our way, which Farage and the Tories will try to do anyway. Oh, we would have had this great deal from Trump. Oh, we wouldn't have done this thing to others if only Starmer was more like, diplomatic. So we'll get that anyway. But it would be obvious to the public that actually it would all be his fault. Capitulation against Russia, lost trade, failure on Paris Climate Accords, all the works. But although we're going to try to come to an arrangement with Trump that benefits us both, at least in some areas, there's every chance he's going to make us choose between being friends with the US and friends with the EU, because quite a few of Trump's top teams seem to be making that explicitly clear. So if we had to choose which way to go, well, I've said before, should be clear we have to choose Europe. And not because I'm aggrieved that we suffered and continue to suffer from the hard Brexit. There are some who see the coming of Trump as a good thing because they think it will hasten our entry into the EU again, or at least the single market. Which is folly in my view. Not only does it risk the opposite, but what they seem to be hoping is that Trump actually does do all of the things he's threatening to do, which is net bad. Like, Starmer's got officials working on calculations about the impacts of Trump's various policies at the moment, and some think the worst case scenario is worse than Brexit. Now, the reason we should side with the EU is for several reasons, none of which are really related to Brexit. First, our trade is much more with Europe than America. A Trump-inspired trade war could see us ranged against the EU if we're not careful. If we have to take an extra loss of trade anywhere, and we'd rather not, but if we had to, arguably makes more sense to take the hit from the USA. Second, we seem to have some understanding that the defence of Ukraine is not just a moral cause, but a practical one. We are already paying a very high price, politically and financially, from not kicking Russia out of Crimea 10 years ago when it would have been easy. If we do not act properly this time, the cost will be much higher again. Because there is no settlement with Putin. None at all. There's little periods where he rearms before going again. There is only an ever-expanding Russian empire into Europe or the defeat of Putin. There is no in-between. There is no settlement. There is no point at which Putin says, that's it, I've got enough now. And he said so. He's actually said so. Trump's team may be too thick to understand this, but not all European leaders are. Third, we are aligned on the need to address the climate emergency. We're obviously not going to find accord with Trump on that. Fourth, the price Trump will initially exact might seem light. He may just say, look, back us over the EU and we won't apply tariffs. And we go, oh, no, we'll do that then. And then we waste a load of time where we could be aligned with the EU and we're not. And then he comes back for more, because of course he'll keep coming back for more. He's a bully. He's an extortionist. He will want then the trade deal, which means ownership of the NHS, wiping out British agriculture, not only against UK interests, it will shred Labour's manifesto. There will be no arguing semantics. There are things quite clearly stated in Labour's manifesto that Trump wants our government to cancel. So if we do that, then Starmer will not be able to claim he's stuck by his manifesto in 4 years' time. There'll be no arguing about the words. But just because I see it in those logical terms doesn't mean the government do. We know how these things sometimes work. Foreign Office officials, sometimes a bit cautious, favour the path of least resistance and hope things settle down. And it often doesn't. And it's got us into trouble before. So what will the government decide? Well, today's Armistice Day provides a hint. Keir Starmer's in Paris. A British Prime Minister has not spent Armistice Day in France since the Second World War ended. If it were next year, you would just say, well, look, it's the 80th anniversary, the last big event where you can expect veterans of any world war to be present. But it's the 79th. It's like not particularly significant in terms of the history. The fact that Starmer and Macron will be holding talks about Ukraine and the Middle East is also a sign this is a very public statement. Now, of course, this event, I don't think, will have been hastily arranged in the last few days, although it could have been. I hadn't seen any news about this visit before yesterday. It came as a complete surprise to me when I read about it like last night. Certainly, if this was arranged at the last minute, it's a clear sign that Starmer is showing intent. He's siding with Europe, on Ukraine at least. But even if it was arranged a while ago, the government will have known that it was going to take place after the US elections and that there was a credible chance that Trump would win the election. After all, Starmer and Lammy have been forging diplomatic links with Trump and his top team for months. They may not have liked the presidential election result, but they were ready for it. Seems difficult to interpret this as anything other than a message to the world, including across the Atlantic. Starmer could have had a phone call with Macron to discuss things like Ukraine and the Middle East and spent Armistice Day here. You know, the fact that he's gone, no, we're going to go there for the photo, standing side by side with Macron, who is the European leader who's most pro-Ukraine, really, apart from obviously the countries immediately around it. It's a statement that, look, we've got business of common interest with Europe, and a change in American president isn't going to derail that. After all, this isn't just Starmer standing with a European leader on Armistice Day. If that's all there was to it, you might argue, look, you're reading a bit too much into the symbolism here. But given that there are going to be talks about strategy on Ukraine and the Middle East, and this has been widely reported, they could have had a phone call. This is definitely a statement. The Telegraph have definitely taken it as a statement. They've accused Starmer as attempt of looking, you know, running the risk at the very least of undermining US foreign policy. Not sure what they're complaining about. They made almost weekly attempts to undermine Biden's foreign policy and encourage the government to do so as well. Of course, this public show will also go alongside private meetings with British officials and Trump's team. I noticed widespread reports that one of Trump's advisors explicitly stated that Crimea at least belongs to Russia, and that's all there is to it. But Trump's spokesperson then said that this statement was not speaking for the president-elect. It's not his formal policy, which might suggest Trump is wary to commit himself to any details on his position on Ukraine, while he works out which outcome will be most profitable for him. Although I will just end by saying that one grievance that Trump has about the whole affair is entirely justified. He has for years complained that other NATO members are not paying their share. Now, he's right about that. The US benefits from European stability, sure. In a very polarised world, Europe is generally on America's side in terms of the big players on the world stage. But it's not just diplomatic. We're a wealthy market buying American goods. We saw what happens with the invasion of Ukraine. It hit global trade. Well, that's Ukraine. It should be explained to Trump. It's not in his interest to allow that sort of instability to hit other countries in Europe as well. You know, you don't want some of your best customers suffering the sort of instability that will inevitably lead to lower trade for America. Like, where's he going to make the lost trade up with? China? I don't think that's his plan. But it is still the case that Europe has taken America for granted for too long. America spends over 3% of its GDP on defence. The only countries in Europe who do the same, or better, are those who are Putin's targets. The rest of us should deal with our own shit and just ask America for backup now and then. In fact, you would argue with Ukraine, just like with a lot of other things, we'd have been better off not having America take the lead. You know, we should deal with our own stuff. We shouldn't lean onto them to the point where their sudden withdrawal leaves us completely screwed. You know, but I'll be talking more about that later this week. In the meantime, I'm taking this visit today to be a very positive sign. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. If you enjoyed the video, please click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, you can click the join button for memberships. Thanks for watching. And until next time, I'll see you later.